Oakhaven is the kind of town that feels like it's stuck in time. You know, the sort of place where everyone knows your name, and kids ride their bikes to the corner store without a care in the world. It's nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, with a lake so still you'd swear it could hold all your secrets. My wife, Nora, and I built our life here. We thought it was the perfect place to raise a family. Back then, I was naive enough to believe in perfect. I'm Leo Vance, cybersecurity guy by trade, problem solver by nature. I've always been the type to keep my head down, work hard, and let life unfold as it will. Nora, on the other hand, is the spark in any room she walks into. She's a pediatrician, brilliant, compassionate, and the kind of person you can't help but love. Together, we had what looked like a picture-perfect life. 3 kids, a beautiful house, and the kind of quiet stability people dream of. Alex is my oldest. He's 14 and full of energy. The kid could talk his way out of detention with that quick wit of his. Sophie, at 12, is our artist. Her room is a mess of sketches and paint tubes, and she has this way of seeing the world that makes you think she's been here before. And Liam, our youngest, is 10 going on 30. He's got a knack for numbers that would put most accountants to shame. We weren't rich by Oakhaven standards, but we were comfortable. My cybersecurity firm had taken off, and Nora's job at the local clinic gave her a sense of purpose. We had Friday night pizza traditions, lazy Sunday mornings, and family game nights where the kids usually ganged up on me. Life wasn't just good, it was great. Or so I thought. Everything started to unravel on an ordinary evening. I was in my home office, finishing up a client's data breach case. It was late, and the rhythmic click of my keyboard was the only sound in the house. Or at least it was, until I heard Nora laughing in the garden. Her laugh used to be my favorite sound, but that night, something about it set my teeth on edge. I couldn't place why, not until I heard what she said next. "Can you believe he still has no clue?" she said, her voice light, almost mocking. I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard, the sentence on the screen unfinished. No clue about what? I wanted to convince myself it was nothing, a misunderstanding, maybe even a joke. But my gut told me otherwise. You don't spend 15 years with someone without learning how their laughter sounds when it's hiding something. I sat there, replaying her words in my mind until they didn't feel real anymore. My mind wandered to the past, little moments I'd brushed off now resurfacing with new weight. Alex's athleticism, for example. The kid was a natural, something neither Nora nor I had ever been. And Sophie's auburn hair. I'd always chalked it up to some distant relative we'd never met. Then there was Liam, who could balance a budget better than I could by the time he was 7. It wasn't just the kids. Daniel, my best friend since college, had always been a little too present. He was the kind of guy who could charm his way into any room, and he seemed to have made himself at home in my family's life, too. He'd been there for the big moments, Alex's soccer championships, Sophie's art shows, Liam's math competitions, and the small ones, like barbecues and lazy afternoons on the lake. I trusted him. I trusted them all. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, staring at the framed photo of our family on my desk. The smiles in that picture seemed foreign now, like they belonged to a family I'd never met. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, I tried to shake off the unease. I convinced myself I was overthinking it, that work stress had me seeing shadows where there were none. But when I looked at Nora over breakfast, something had shifted. She looked the same, radiant as ever in her scrubs, pouring orange juice and laughing at Liam's jokes. But I couldn't unhear her words. Can you believe he still has no clue? Well, whatever she was hiding, I was going to find out. And when I did, I knew nothing would ever be the same. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's where I was the next few days after hearing Nora in the garden. I told myself, over and over, it was nothing, that I was just overthinking things. But the harder I tried to ignore it, the louder it got, like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. My wife, the woman I'd built my entire life around, was hiding something. I just didn't know what. The first thing that really stuck out to me was Alex. My son has always been a natural athlete, fast on his feet, strong for his age, and confident in ways I never was. He made the soccer team's starting lineup without even trying, and every coach he's had practically worshipped the ground he walked on. For years, I chalked it up to him being lucky or maybe inheriting some recessive gene I didn't know about. But now, when I watched him out there on the field, weaving through defenders like he was born to do it, I couldn't help but wonder, where did that come from? Then there was Sophie, my little artist. She has this fiery auburn hair that always makes her stand out in a crowd. It's beautiful, really, but neither Nora have anything close to that shade. Every time someone commented on her hair, Nora would laugh and say something about it being from her great aunt or some distant cousin. I never questioned it before, but now, every time I looked at her, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that her auburn hair didn't match ours. And that maybe it wasn't supposed to. Liam was the last piece of the puzzle and, honestly, the hardest to reconcile. He's only 10, but the kid is a mathematical genius. I'm talking about solving problems in his head that I'd need a calculator for. I always assumed he got that from me. I'm no slouch when it comes to numbers, after all. But now, I wasn't so sure. His gift seemed almost foreign, like it didn't belong to me at all. But it wasn't just the kids. It was Daniel, too. My best friend. My best man. The guy I trusted with everything. He'd always been a constant presence in our lives, almost like a second father to the kids. He'd show up to their games, bring over gifts just because, and offer advice on everything from finances to parenting. For years, I thought it was because he cared about me and my family. But now, every time I saw him, something about his easy smile and effortless charm made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played, that there was a game going on around me, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. That's when I decided to call in help. Enter Victor Reyes. If you've ever seen a movie where the private investigator walks in, all trench coat and fedora, you've basically met Victor, except instead of the cliché, he showed up in a tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase, with eyes so sharp they felt like they could cut through steel. He was the real deal, known for digging up the truth no matter how deep it was buried. I'd heard about him through a colleague who'd gone through a messy divorce, and if anyone could untangle this mess, it was Victor. Our first meeting was in a coffee shop 2 towns over. I didn't want to risk anyone in Oakhaven seeing us. I laid it all out for him. The conversation I overheard, the doubts about my kids, my suspicions about Daniel. He didn't say much at first, just nodded and jotted down notes on a tablet. When I finished, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Leave nothing out, Mr. Vance. If you want the truth, you need to be ready for whatever it reveals." That hit me hard. Was I ready? Could I handle what he might find? I didn't have an answer, but I nodded anyway. What choice did I have? Victor got to work immediately. Within days, he had a preliminary report that turned my world upside down. DNA tests. That's where he started. Simple, clinical, and absolutely devastating. The results showed that Alex, Sophie, and Liam weren't biologically mine. All 3 of them were a match with Daniel, my best friend, my brother in everything but blood. I stared at those results for hours, my mind racing. The kids I'd raised, the kids I'd loved and sacrificed for, weren't mine. And worse, Daniel had to have known. This wasn't some one-night mistake. This was a betrayal so deep it shook me to my core. Victor didn't stop there. He started combing through financial records, looking for anything else that didn't add up. Turns out, there was plenty. Nora and Daniel had been funneling money into offshore accounts for years. The transactions were cleverly disguised as household expenses, vacation funds, and medical reimbursements. But they weren't for us. They were for them. Piece by piece, the life I thought I knew was crumbling. And with every revelation, my anger grew. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my kids, my family, my entire sense of reality. And I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. When Victor delivered his next report, it was like getting punched in the gut all over again. Every page, every photograph, every bank statement was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I'd built. I wasn't sure how much more I could take, but Victor had warned me. This will get worse before it gets better. The DNA tests and financial records were just the tip of the iceberg. Victor had uncovered more, a lot more. Daniel and Nora hadn't just betrayed me. They'd built an entire life behind my back, one woven into the very fabric of my own. And then there was Eleanor, my own mother. Her name came up in emails Victor had uncovered, and let me tell you, that was the hardest betrayal of all. You see, my mother, Eleanor, had always been a force of nature, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have everyone eating out of the palm of her hand in minutes. Growing up, she had this way of making you feel like the sun rose and set on her approval. I thought she loved me. I thought she wanted the best for me. Turns out, her definition of best didn't include honesty or loyalty. Victor had unearthed emails dating back over a decade, some sent just weeks before my wedding to Nora. In one particularly gut-wrenching exchange, Eleanor had written to Nora, He is the better match, dear. Leo is stable and successful, but Daniel offers excitement and passion. With him, you'll have everything. Trust me, this is for the best. Daniel. My best friend. My mother had actively encouraged Nora to keep him in the picture. And the worst part? She believed she was helping me. She thought she was crafting a perfect life for me, one where I was none the wiser. That wasn't love. That was manipulation. Then there was Father Michael. I'd always respected the man. He'd presided over my wedding, baptized my kids, and even offered marital counsel to Nora and me during a rough patch years ago. I never would have guessed he was part of this mess, but there he was, right in the middle of it. Victor discovered that Father Michael had been helping Nora cover her tracks for years. He'd written letters and forged documents to explain her church retreats, which were actually weekends spent with Daniel at my mother's beach house. The same beach house where I'd spent summers as a kid, thinking it was a sanctuary. It was disgusting. And let's talk about Chloe Ross. That was the curveball I didn't see coming. Chloe was Daniel's wife, or at least that's what I'd always believed. She was the godmother to Sophie, for crying out loud. But as Victor dug deeper, her role in all of this came to light. Not only did she know about the affair, but she had her own tangled history with Daniel. Turns out, she'd had a child with him years ago, a secret she'd kept from everyone, including Nora. Chloe had been playing her own game, balancing loyalty to Nora with protecting her secret. And when Victor confronted her during his investigation, she broke down. She told him everything, about the affair, the child, and how she turned a blind eye to Nora's deception because she didn't want her own life to fall apart. It was a mess, a tangled web of lies and betrayal that just kept growing. By the time Victor laid it all out for me, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. This wasn't some one-off mistake. This was a conspiracy, carefully planned and executed by the people I trusted most. Daniel, Nora, Eleanor, Father Michael, Chloe, they'd all played their parts, and I'd been the unwitting fool at the center of it all. But here's the thing about betrayal, it either breaks you or it sharpens you. I wasn't about to let this break me. I started working with Victor and my lawyer, Clara Finch, to map out my next steps. Clara, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for dismantling high-profile cases, took one look at the evidence and said, they're not just guilty. They're toast. We came up with a plan. First, we protect the kids. Whatever else happened, I didn't want Alex, Sophie, and Liam caught in the crossfire. I set up trust funds for each of them, airtight, ironclad, completely untouchable by anyone but them. I wanted them to have a future, no matter what the truth might do to their present. Next, we confront the lies head-on. Clara and Victor were meticulous, building a case that would expose every deception, every betrayal, and every dollar stolen. It wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming my life. And finally, I started to plan my exit. I wasn't going to stick around Oakhaven forever, not after everything that had happened. But I wasn't going to leave until I'd set things right. I wanted them all to feel the weight of what they'd done, to me, to my family, and to the life they'd stolen from me. The stage was set. The players were all in place. And I was ready to pull the curtain back on their lies. Thanksgiving was always a big deal in our family. Nora loved hosting, loved pulling out all the stops to make the house look like something out of a Hallmark movie. The kids would help set the table, Eleanor would bring her famous pecan pie, and Daniel, of course, would show up with an overpriced bottle of wine and that smug grin I couldn't stand anymore. This year Thanksgiving wasn't about turkey or family traditions. This year was about the truth. The planning started weeks in advance. Clara, Victor, and I worked out every detail. This wasn't going to be a messy, emotional confrontation. It was going to be precise, calculated, surgical. I wanted to expose every lie, every betrayal, and leave no room for excuses. Everyone involved, Nora, Daniel, Eleanor, even Chloe, was going to be there. I made sure of it. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up early. The house was already filled with the smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. Nora was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she basted the turkey. She looked so at ease, so normal, it almost made me question what I was about to do. Almost. But then I remembered everything. Her laughter in the garden, the DNA tests, the bank statements. And my resolve hardened. She had built this life on lies, and today, those lies were coming down. Guests started arriving around noon. First, Eleanor, dressed to the nines as always, her smile as practiced as ever. "Darling, the house looks wonderful," she said, kissing me on the cheek. Her warmth felt hollow now. But I played along, let her think everything was fine. Daniel and his wife, Chloe, were next. Daniel handed me the usual bottle of wine, a Bordeaux this time, because of course it was, and gave me a firm handshake. "Looking good, Leo," he said, his tone as casual as if he hadn't spent years dismantling my life behind my back. Chloe looked nervous. She avoided my eyes as she walked past me, clutching her purse like it held a secret she didn't want to spill. The rest of the guests trickled in, filling the house with laughter and the kind of small talk that made me want to scream. I kept my cool, though, greeting everyone, smiling, playing the perfect host. They had no idea what was coming. Dinner was served at 5 o'clock. The table was set beautifully, Nora's handiwork, of course. The kids sat at one end, already digging into the mashed potatoes. At the other end, I took my seat at the head of the table, the envelopes tucked discreetly under each napkin. As the plates were passed around and glasses were filled, I stood up and raised mine. "Before we dig in," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I want to thank all of you for being here. Family and friends mean everything to me, and I'm grateful to have you in my life." Nora smiled at me from across the table, her eyes soft. Daniel raised his glass with a nod, and Eleanor beamed. For a moment, I almost hated what I was about to do. Almost. "I've also prepared something for each of you," I continued, motioning to the table. "Under your napkins, you'll find an envelope. Please take a moment to open it." The room fell silent as everyone reached for the envelopes. The sound of tearing paper and rustling pages filled the air, and then, one by one, the reactions began. Chloe gasped first, her hand flying to her mouth. Eleanor's face went pale, her carefully maintained composure slipping for the first time in years. Daniel froze, his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes scanning the contents of his envelope. And Nora just stared at hers, her hands trembling, her face drained of all color. "What is this?" Daniel finally said, his voice low and shaky. "You tell me," I replied, my voice calm but cold. 15 years of lies, Daniel. "You want to explain, or should I?" Nora looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Leo, I don't..." "Not yet," I snapped, cutting her off. "Let's let Daniel have his say first." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but Chloe beat him to it. "You bastard," she hissed, throwing her envelope onto the table. "How long were you planning to keep this from me? From all of us?" Eleanor tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "Leo, please, stop," I said, turning to her. "Don't you dare play innocent. I've seen the emails, Eleanor. I know you orchestrated this. You lied to me, to my kids. You chose Daniel over your own son." The room erupted into chaos. Chloe was yelling at Daniel, Eleanor was crying, and Nora just sat there, staring at the documents in front of her like they were a death sentence. The kids, confused and scared, looked to me for answers. I hated that they had to see this, but there was no going back now. I took a deep breath and addressed the room. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of you and the choices you've made, the lies you've told, the lives you've destroyed. I loved you, all of you, and you betrayed me in the worst possible way." Nora finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leo, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this." "Didn't mean for what?" I snapped. "Didn't mean for me to find out? Didn't mean for my entire life to be a lie? You don't get to play the victim here, Nora. None of you do." The room fell silent again, the weight of the truth pressing down on everyone. I looked around the table, taking in their faces, the guilt, the shame, the fear. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, but it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. It felt empty. I turned to the kids and softened my tone. "Go upstairs," I told them gently. "This isn't something you need to be a part of." They hesitated, but eventually, they got up and left the room. Once they were gone, I turned back to the table. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I've already taken steps to protect the kids and myself. The trust funds are set up, the accounts are secure, and as for the rest of you, you'll have to live with what you've done." And with that, I walked out of the dining room, leaving them to deal with the wreckage of their own making. When I walked out of that dining room, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant or even relieved. What I felt was hollow, like I just dropped a wrecking ball on a house I'd spent 15 years building. But this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. That was just the beginning, the first crack in the facade. What came next was about control, about ensuring that none of them, Nora, Daniel, Eleanor, or anyone else, could ever manipulate me or my kids again. I spent the next few weeks executing my plan. If the Thanksgiving showdown was the detonation, this was the cleanup, the part where I ensured that every piece of fallout landed where I wanted it. Clara, my lawyer, had already drafted divorce papers. She was ruthless, which was exactly what I needed. The documents left no room for negotiation. Nora would walk away with nothing but her personal belongings. The house, the cars, the savings accounts, everything was under my name now, thanks to the careful financial restructuring Clara and Victor had orchestrated. The trust funds I'd set up for the kids were ironclad. Nora couldn't touch them, and neither could Daniel or Eleanor. Each fund was designed to provide for the kids' education, health care, and any major life milestones. They were protected, not just from the betrayers in my life, but from me, too. I wanted to ensure the kids would have everything they needed, no matter how messy things got. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the legacy they were leaving behind, the lies they had tried to bury. Victor and I worked to document everything. The DNA results, the financial misappropriations, the emails between Nora and Daniel, and the messages from Eleanor. I wanted it all on record, not to use as a weapon, but as insurance. If they ever tried to twist the narrative, I'd have the truth ready and waiting. Then there was the house. The home where so many memories had been made now felt like a crime scene. I couldn't stand being there, but I knew it wasn't just about me. The kids needed stability, and for now, that meant staying put. I had the locks changed and installed a state-of-the-art security system. Daniel wasn't the type to do anything reckless, but I wasn't taking any chances. The house was mine now, and I wasn't about to let him set foot in it again. Nora didn't take the divorce papers well. She showed up at the house one evening, unannounced, her face streaked with tears. She begged me to reconsider, to think about the kids, to give her a chance to make things right. But I couldn't, not after everything she'd done. "Leo, I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "But I love you. I always have." I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of her actions. "If you loved me," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have built a life with someone else while pretending to share one with me." She cried harder, but I didn't waver. This wasn't just about her or me anymore. It was about the kids, about the future, about rebuilding a life that wasn't based on lies. Daniel, predictably, tried a different tactic. He called me up, acting like the Thanksgiving disaster had been some minor misunderstanding. "Leo," he said, his tone smooth, "we've been friends for years. Let's not let this ruin everything. We can move past it." "Move past it?" I snapped. "You slept with my wife, Daniel. You fathered my children, and then you spent years lying to my face about it. Tell me, what part of that do you think I should just move past?" He stammered, caught off guard by my bluntness. For once, Daniel didn't have a clever response. He just hung up, and that was the last I heard from him. Eleanor, though, she was the wild card. My mother, the woman who had shaped so much of who I was, had been a puppet master in this entire ordeal. She called me a week after Thanksgiving, asking to meet. I agreed, not because I wanted to hear her excuses, but because I needed closure. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far away from prying eyes. She looked older than I remembered, her usual poise replaced by something brittle, almost desperate. "Leo," she began, her voice soft, "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But everything I did for you. For me." I asked, my voice heavy with disbelief. "You encouraged my wife to cheat on me. You covered for her lies. You helped Daniel take what was mine. How, exactly, was any of that for me?" She flinched at my words, but pressed on. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I gave her what she wanted, she would stay, and you'd have a stable family." I shook my head, disgusted. "You didn't protect me, Mom. You protected her lies. You made me a fool in my own life." She reached across the table, but I pulled back. "I'll provide for you, Mom," I said coldly. "I won't leave you without support. But you and we're done." Her tears didn't move me. They couldn't, not anymore. By the time the dust settled, I'd set everything in motion. The divorce was filed, the kids' futures were secure, and I was ready to leave Oakhaven behind. Not yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, but soon. I didn't know where I was going yet, but one thing was certain. When I left, it would be with my head held high, knowing I'd taken back control of my life. There's a strange calm that comes after the storm. It's not peaceful, not by any stretch, but it's steady, predictable. After the showdown at Thanksgiving and the weeks of unraveling the mess left behind, I finally had clarity. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But clarity isn't the same as resolution. There was still so much to figure out, so much to rebuild. I focused on the kids first. They were my priority. Alex, Sophie, and Liam didn't know the full extent of what had happened, and honestly, I wasn't ready to tell them. They deserved to hold on to their innocence for a little while longer. But they weren't stupid. Kids pick up on things, even when you think you're shielding them. Alex had started asking more questions, wanting to know why Daniel hadn't been around since Thanksgiving. Sophie was quieter than usual, her sketchpad filling up with darker, more abstract drawings. And Liam, my little math prodigy, had taken to solving equations obsessively, as if numbers could make sense of the chaos around him. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, dinners together, movie nights, soccer games. But the cracks were there, no matter how hard I tried to smooth them over. One evening, Alex caught me off guard. "Dad," he said, standing in the doorway of my office. His voice was hesitant, like he wasn't sure he should ask what was on his mind. "What's up, bud?" I replied, setting down the paperwork I'd been poring over. "Is something going on with you and Mom?" His eyes were serious, more serious than a 14-year-old's eyes should be. "You've been different." I sighed, motioning for him to come in. He sat on the edge of my desk, his posture stiff. "Things are complicated right now," I admitted. "But I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you. That will never change." He nodded, but his eyes searched mine, looking for an answer I wasn't ready to give. "Is it because of Uncle Daniel?" he asked quietly. That hit me like a punch to the gut. "Why do you ask that?" I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I don't know," he mumbled, looking down at his hands. "It's just, he's always been around, and now he's not. And Mom's been weird, too. I don't get it." I reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. "Alex, there are some things I can't explain right now. But I promise you this. I'll always tell you the truth when the time is right. For now, I just need you to trust me, okay?" He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't satisfied. I didn't blame him. I wasn't satisfied either. Meanwhile, I was making plans for my own future. I couldn't stay in Oakhaven forever. The town was tainted now, every corner holding memories I wanted to forget. But leaving wasn't as simple as packing a bag and walking out the door. I had to set up a life somewhere else, a place where I could start fresh, away from the shadows of Nora, Daniel, and Eleanor. I reached out to an old college friend, David, who had moved to Crestwood years ago and started a tech consulting firm. We hadn't spoken in ages, but when I explained my situation, he didn't hesitate. "Leo, you're welcome here anytime," he said over the phone. "We've got room for someone with your skills. And honestly, a change of scenery sounds like exactly what you need." I spent weeks preparing for the move. Selling the house was the hardest part. It wasn't just a building, it was the backdrop of my kids' lives. Their first steps, their birthdays, their laughter, it all lived in those walls. But I knew staying there would only hold us back. I made sure the kids were involved in the process, letting them pick out their rooms in the new house David had helped me find. It wasn't Oakhaven, but it had potential. It could be home. Nora, of course, didn't take the news well. She came over one afternoon, uninvited, her face red and puffy from crying. "You're taking them away from me," she said, her voice trembling. "You're ripping apart their lives." "They'll still see you," I said, my tone calm but firm. "I'll never keep them from you. But they need stability, and I can't give them that here. Neither can you." She tried to argue, but I didn't budge. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about what was best for the kids and for me. The day we left Oakhaven was bittersweet. As I loaded the last box into the U-Haul, I stood on the front lawn and took one last look at the house. Nora was there, standing on the porch, tears streaming down her face. The kids hugged her goodbye, their emotions a mix of sadness and anticipation. When we finally hit the road, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that we were leaving the lies and betrayals behind, fear of the unknown. But as the miles stretched out in front of us, I felt something else, too. Hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance to build something real, something honest. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one. Crestwood greeted us with its rainy charm and vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the suffocating familiarity of Oakhaven. It felt like stepping into a new world, a world full of possibilities and second chances. The house David helped me find wasn't massive, but it was perfect for the four of us, nestled on a quiet street with a view of the forest. It felt like a sanctuary, a blank slate. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Unpacking, settling the kids into their new schools, and adjusting to a completely different pace of life kept me busy. Alex seemed to thrive immediately. He joined the soccer team at his new high school and was making friends faster than I could keep track. Sophie took a bit longer, retreating into her sketchbooks and headphones, but she eventually warmed up to her new surroundings. Liam, true to form, dived headfirst into his math club and was already impressing his teachers with his aptitude for problem-solving. For me, it was all about work. David welcomed me into his firm like family, and diving into projects gave me a sense of purpose. The work was challenging, consulting for startups trying to make their mark in the tech world, but it was exactly what I needed. Each success, no matter how small, felt like another step away from the mess I'd left behind. But rebuilding wasn't just about logistics or work. It was about reconnecting with myself, rediscovering who I was beyond the roles of husband and father. I started running in the mornings, letting the crisp air and steady rhythm of my footsteps clear my mind. I began journaling, something I hadn't done since college, pouring my thoughts onto paper in an attempt to make sense of everything. The kids were my anchor through it all. Their laughter filled the house, and their small victories became mine. Alex scored his first goal in a soccer match, and I was there in the stands, cheering like a madman. Sophie started taking art classes at a local studio, her confidence growing with each sketch. Liam's teacher called me one evening just to tell me how impressed she was with his problem-solving skills. But even in the midst of all this progress, the shadows of the past lingered. Nora called regularly, her voice tinged with sadness and regret. She wanted updates on the kids, which I gave her, but our conversations were brief and to the point. There was no room for reminiscing, no space for apologies that wouldn't change anything. Then there was Eleanor. She wrote letters, long, handwritten apologies that arrived in the mail every few weeks. I couldn't bring myself to read most of them, but I kept them in a drawer. Part of me hated her for what she'd done, but another part, a smaller, quieter part, missed her. She was my mother, after all, and no amount of betrayal could completely erase that bond. As for Daniel, he stayed quiet. No calls, no messages. I figured he'd finally realized that there was no redemption for what he'd done. Good riddance. One evening, as I sat on the back porch watching the rain, Alex joined me. He had that serious look on his face again, the one that made him seem older than his years. "Dad," he said, sitting down beside me, "are we going to be okay here?" I put an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We're going to be okay. It's going to take time, but this is a good place for us. A fresh start." He nodded, resting his head against my shoulder. "I like it here," he said quietly. "It feels different. Better." "Me too," I replied. And for the first time in a long time, I truly meant it. Over the next few months, the pieces started falling into place. The kids settled into their routines, and I found myself thriving at work. David and I even started discussing the idea of launching a new division of the firm focused on sustainable tech solutions. It felt good to build something again, to create instead of just reacting to the chaos life had thrown my way. I also started opening up, little by little. I joined a local support group for divorced parents, where I met others who had been through their own versions of heartbreak and betrayal. Sharing my story and hearing theirs helped me process my emotions in ways I hadn't expected. It reminded me that I wasn't alone. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I pulled out one of Eleanor's letters. Her handwriting was neat and deliberate, just as I remembered from the notes she used to leave me as a kid. This one was shorter than the others, but it hit me hard. "Leo, I know I can never undo the damage I caused. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I think about you every day. You and the kids are my greatest regrets and my greatest loves. I hope someday you'll let me make amends. Love, Mom." I sat there for a long time, staring at the words. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her. Maybe I never would be. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something close to understanding. She had made terrible choices, but I couldn't deny that she had loved me in her own way. The next morning, I wrote her back. It wasn't much, just a few lines letting her know we were doing well and that I appreciated her letter. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step. A small one, but a step nonetheless. Life in Crestwood wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, moments when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. But there were good days, too, days filled with laughter and hope. And those were the days I held on to, the days that reminded me why I was rebuilding in the first place. This was our new life, and for the first time, it felt like it was truly ours. Life in Crestwood had settled into a steady rhythm, but some nights, the ghosts of Oakhaven haunted me. Memories of that Thanksgiving, the betrayal, and the unraveling of a life I'd thought was solid as stone crept into my thoughts. I tried to bury them in the routines of work and parenting, but the past has a funny way of demanding attention. It was Eleanor's letters that eventually pulled me back. Her apologies had been a consistent, quiet presence in my life, like the ticking of a clock you forget is there until the room goes silent. I didn't respond often, but when I did, she always replied. Her letters were thoughtful, introspective, and filled with regret. Over time, they began to chip away at my anger. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with her latest letter. It was different this time, not just an apology but an invitation. Leo, I know I have no right to ask for your time or forgiveness, but I miss you. I miss my grandchildren. I've made mistakes, terrible ones, but I want to try to make things right. If you're willing, I'd like to see you, just once. If not, I understand. Always, Mom. I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. Seeing her again wasn't something I'd planned for, but maybe it was time. Crestwood had given me space to heal, and I felt stronger now, maybe strong enough to face her. The following weekend, I packed up the kids and made the drive back toward Oakhaven. I didn't tell Nora or Daniel we were coming. This wasn't about them. It was about closure, about tying up loose ends so I could finally move forward. We met Eleanor at a small park near her apartment. She looked older, frilier than I remembered. Her once impeccably styled hair was now streaked with gray, and her designer clothes had been replaced by something simpler, less polished. But her eyes, the same sharp, calculating eyes I'd inherited, lit up when she saw us. Leo, she said softly, her voice trembling. She reached out as if to hug me, then hesitated. I nodded, and she pulled me into an embrace. It was awkward, tentative, but it was something. The kids were more hesitant. Alex hung back, his hands shoved into his pockets, while Sophie and Liam stayed close to me. Eleanor didn't push. She just smiled at them, her eyes brimming with tears. I've missed you all so much, she said, her voice cracking. Thank you for coming. We spent the afternoon talking, or rather, she talked while I listened. She told me about her regrets, about the guilt that had consumed her since Thanksgiving. She admitted she'd been wrong, not just in how she'd meddled in my marriage, but in how she tried to control my life for so many years. I thought I was helping, she said, her hands trembling as she clutched her tea. I thought I knew what was best for you. But all I did was ruin everything. For the first time, I saw her vulnerability. Eleanor had always been a force of nature, strong, unyielding, and certain of her decisions. Seeing her like this, broken and remorseful, softened something in me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet. But I appreciate you taking responsibility. That's more than I can say for some people. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't deserve forgiveness, Leo. But I want you to know, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. The visit with Eleanor was draining but cathartic. It felt like closing a chapter, even if the book wasn't finished yet. But being back in the vicinity of Oakhaven stirred up other feelings, too, feelings I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Nora found out we were in town, of course. Word travels fast in a place like Oakhaven. She called me the evening after we saw Eleanor, her voice anxious and tentative. Leo, she said, I heard you're here. Can we talk? Just for a little while. I almost said no. The thought of seeing her again, hearing her excuses, felt like reopening a wound that had just started to heal. But something in her voice stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the faint hope that she'd finally own up to what she'd done. We met at a diner on the edge of town, a place we used to go to when we were dating. She looked almost the same as she had the last time I saw her. Put together, beautiful, but carrying the weight of her choices. Thank you for coming, she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. I wasn't sure if you would. I didn't respond, waiting for her to speak. She fidgeted, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. I wanted to apologize, she began. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything. For lying to you, for betraying you, for all of it. Her voice cracked, and she looked down at her coffee. I ruined us, Leo. I ruined our family, and I hate myself for it. Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of all the pain she'd caused. But another part of me, maybe the part that still loved her, or at least who she used to be, felt sorry for her. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. But sorry doesn't fix this, Nora. It doesn't undo the years of lies or the damage you've done. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I don't want you to hate me. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. And I don't know if I ever will. We sat in silence for a while after that, the hum of the diner filling the space between us. When we finally said goodbye, it felt like closing another door, one that needed to stay shut. Driving back to Crestwood the next day, I felt a strange sense of relief. Revisiting the past had been hard, but it was necessary. It reminded me of how far I'd come, how much I'd rebuilt. The kids were quiet in the back seat, lost in their own thoughts. As we crossed the state line, Alex leaned forward and said, Dad, are we done with Oak Haven now? I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and nodded. Yeah, buddy, we're done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Crestwood was home now. It wasn't just the place we lived, it was the place we were becoming a family again. After revisiting the past and closing the door on Oak Haven, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a life for me, for Alex, Sophie, and Liam, and for the future that was finally within reach. One of the first things I did was fully immerse myself in my work at David's firm. It was more than just a job. It was a chance to create something meaningful. We'd started discussing a new division focused on tech solutions for underserved communities, helping small businesses adapt to the digital age, creating tools for better access to education, and even working on sustainability projects. I threw myself into it, using my skills to make a tangible difference. The work wasn't just fulfilling, it was transformative. I wasn't just Leo, the man who'd been betrayed. I was Leo, the innovator, the builder, the father who was determined to leave behind a legacy of integrity and impact. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, or maybe a better version of myself, one forged through fire. The kids were thriving, too. Alex had become a leader on his soccer team, balancing practices, games, and schoolwork with a determination that reminded me of myself at his age. He even started talking about wanting to coach someday, saying, I want to help kids the way my coach helped me. Sophie was blooming in her art classes, her sketches becoming more vibrant, more expressive. She entered a local art competition and won second place, her face lighting up with pride as she showed me her ribbon. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad, she said, her voice soft but sincere. That moment was worth more than anything I'd ever accomplished. Ethan, as expected, was excelling in school. His math teacher called me one evening to tell me he'd been selected for an advanced STEM program. He's a natural problem solver, she said, and his enthusiasm is contagious. I couldn't have been prouder. But beyond their individual successes, what mattered most was the bond we were rebuilding as a family. We had our routines now, dinners together every night, movie marathons on Fridays, and Sunday hikes in the nearby forest. We talked more openly, shared our thoughts, and leaned on each other in ways we hadn't before. It wasn't perfect. We still had our struggles, our moments of doubt and frustration, but it was real, and it was ours. I also started letting people into my life again. David became more than just a colleague. He became a friend. He and his wife invited me over for dinner regularly, their easy camaraderie reminding me that I didn't have to do this alone. Through work and the kids' activities, I began to build a new community, one based on mutual respect and genuine connection, not the superficial ties I'd once clung to in Oak Haven. As the months passed, I found myself thinking less about the betrayals and more about the possibilities. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped expecting the past to creep back in and pull me under. I started dreaming again, dreaming about what the future could look like, not just for me, but for all of us. And then one evening, as I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Alex joined me. He sat down with the same serious expression he'd had when he first asked me about Mom and Daniel. Dad, he said, his voice steady, do you ever think about going back? Not to Oak Haven, but to them. It took me a moment to respond. Sometimes, I admit it, but not because I want to. It's more like finishing a book you started. You want to know how it ends, even if you don't want to read the story anymore. Alex nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I'm glad we're here, he said. It feels like we're moving forward. We are, I said, ruffling his hair. And I'm proud of you, Alex. Of all of us. The years rolled on, and Crestwood became more than just a place we lived. It became the foundation of our new legacy. The kids grew, their individual paths taking shape with each passing day. Alex went on to become a coach, just like he dreamed, mentoring kids and teaching them not just about soccer but about resilience and teamwork. Sophie pursued her art, eventually landing a scholarship to a prestigious art school, her talent and passion shining brighter than ever. Ethan's STEM career skyrocketed, his innovations earning him recognition before he even graduated college. As for me, I kept building. David and I expanded our firm, our projects growing in scope and impact. We created programs that changed lives, and every success felt like a step toward erasing the shadows of the past. But it wasn't just about work. It was about the relationships I'd nurtured, the family I'd rebuilt. One day, years later, I stood on the stage at a conference, delivering a keynote about resilience and innovation. The audience was full of bright minds eager to make their mark on the world. As I spoke about the importance of integrity, of building something that lasts, I spotted my kids in the front row, Alex, Sophie, and Liam, all grown, their faces filled with pride. In that moment, I realized that this was my legacy. Not the company, not the success, but them. After the conference, we went to dinner, just the four of us. As we laughed and reminisced, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every betrayal, every hardship, every step forward had led us here, to a place of love, understanding, and hope. Dad, Sophie said as we raised our glasses in a toast, you taught us what it means to be strong, to never give up no matter what. Thank you for that. I looked at them, my three incredible kids, and smiled. You taught me, too, I said. You taught me that no matter how broken things get, there's always a way to rebuild. Together. And with that, we clinked our glasses, sealing not just a toast but a promise that our legacy would always be one of love, resilience, and unshakable bonds. For the first time, I felt at peace, not because I'd moved on from the past, but because I built something far greater in its place. And I knew, without a doubt, that our best days were still ahead.